I wanna know what's going on, baby. Yes, I wanna know what's going on right now, people. Oh, what's going on, brother?
Our advocacy is needed now more than ever before in this community. This is a difficult political climate for family planning, and I am deeply troubled, as I'm sure you are, by the Trump administration's proposed budget cuts. If empowering women is more than just rhetoric for the president, he'll prove it by funding family planning.
Yeah, so I never met Donald Trump before he was elected. There was a thing during the election where he and I were at the same place, and I avoided him. He knew my daughter Jennifer because Trump has this horse show thing down in Florida. In fact, he went up and talked to Jen and was being super nice. And then, like 20 minutes later, he flew in a helicopter to the same place. So clearly he had been driven away, but he wanted to make a grand entrance in a helicopter. Anyway, so when I first talked to him, it was actually kind of scary how much he knew about my daughter's appearance. But Melinda didn't like that too well. Anyway, so I saw him at Trump Tower. I said, hey, science and innovation is a great thing. You should be a leader who drives innovation. And that conversation was about a broad set of things in energy, in health, in education. Pick things you want to do that are big. HIV vaccine, you could, accelerate that. Be associated with innovation. And then the second time I saw him was the March after that, so March 2017 in the White House. In both of those two meetings, he asked me if vaccines weren't a bad thing, because he was considering a commission to look into ill effects of vaccines, and somebody, his name is Robert Kennedy Jr., was advising him that vaccines were causing bad things. And I said, no, that's a dead end. That would be a bad thing. Don't do that. Both times he wanted to know if there was a difference between HIV and HPV. So I was able to explain that those are rarely confused with each other.
But what a lot of people aren't talking about is that there's a very huge percentage of Caucasian women who want to have babies but can't. And the number of women who are childless, not by choice, is actually quite staggering. Now, the Western male and female fertility rates are plunging. And it's because they've had a lot of these vaccines. A lot of these vaccines were given to their young people around 2000 and 2006. And, they've also said that so they've also warned that, that the Western nations, the demographic is plunging. And I've said this before on my show. So by 2030, it's going to be 2 black people for every white person. And that's what they're trying to prevent globally. That's what they're trying to prevent, because in the 1970s, it was 2 white people for every 1 black person.
Let's go to a couple questions that we've actually received since we started the webcast. The first is on population growth. And the question is, one of our most pressing issues is population growth. How do you expect this to be addressed?
Well, the population growth issue at the global level is not that daunting. That is, the population percentage-wise is growing slower today than in the past. And so it will actually peak out. The problem is that the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. And so their ability to feed, educate, provide jobs, stability, protect the environment in those locations mean they're faced with an almost impossible problem. Northern Nigeria, Yemen, Chad. And so what we need to do is take this aid generosity and this innovation and go into those places, offer the women better tools where they want to space birthing or have a smaller family size, and improve health, because it's amazingly, as children survive, parents feel like they'll have enough kids to support them in their old age, and so they choose to have less children. Niger right now, it's still 7 children per family, whereas in the richer countries, you're often at a stable point of which is 2.1 or even less. And so it's really an acute problem in a certain number of places, and we've got to make sure that we help out with the tools now so that they don't have an impossible situation later.
Defense.
Well, I'm a strong proponent that innovation in health and even getting health systems around the world to be decent enough so that as pandemics develop, you see them early, you can catch them before they get completely out of control. In the case of Ebola, which didn't spread very quickly, thank goodness, we still had to dispatch military activity to try and avoid it covering all of Africa and even getting into the richer countries. And so if we underspend on health, we're going to have a flu epidemic, an epidemic of some unknown pathogen that then will economically and even for military activity be very, very expensive. We have had some leaders like General Mattis is now Secretary of Defense in the United States talk about how if you don't have that aid budget, then it forces the military to have to buy more weapons. And so the balance of soft power and hard power, particularly being ready for health crises, that if there's anything that could horrifically go and kill millions of extra people, it would be an epidemic. So you don't want to get out of balance.
You've been vocal, and the foundation has been vocal, deeply troubled about the potential cuts in health funding in the United States of America. When I see volte-face by Donald Trump on China, on Syria, and on North Korea, Phil, what is the possibility that the cuts, the threatened cuts to health, may be scaled back?
Well, certainly I think there's a very good chance that the administrative proposal, the executive branch proposal, won't end up being the exact budget there. There are things like the HIV life-saving work that gets done that's got a very strong backing in the Congress. And budgets go through Congress and they require enough votes in the Senate that they can't just be completely one-sided on an issue like this. So I don't think large cuts will take place, although when that was first put forward, it certainly meant we had to speak up and get even the defense community to say, hey, they care about these things.
You've had a couple of meetings with him. Is he a president that you feel confident? Wear a number of hats, the philanthropy hat, the CEO hat, the Bill Gates hat. Is he a president, and you've met many of them, that you can do business with?
Well, certainly he is the current president. He's pragmatic on a lot of things. It means talking to him and giving him some background that he might not have had through his past work is probably as important with him as with anyone. He wants to be a leader. He wants to have things that he's actually accomplished. I've talked to him about HIV and how the U.S. should be proud of our work there, and there's more that we need to do. So yes, this dialogue is important. You've seen his pragmatism on a number of things, and I'm certainly hoping that these health-related budgets receive some of that attention. I don't think it'd be a good deal to have trade relations between China and the U.S. really fall apart. And so I feel sure that he and the team he brings around them, even as they try and tune things, they won't want the lose-lose that you would get if you start to get large tariff walls. There are challenges. You know, a lot of the strength of the U.S. economy comes from exporters. And, you know, so if you're trying to suppress imports, then you can get into a situation where countries are raising tariff walls.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has thanked Bill Gates for his foundation's contribution in the fight against the coronavirus. In a letter to Mr. Gates, President Xi Jinping's Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation acted quickly and has played an active role in the global response to the virus. Xi Jinping also said he supports the foundation's cooperation with relevant Chinese institutions. Bill Gates wrote to President Xi Jinping on February the 6th, saying his foundation has committed up to $100 million in emergency funding to stop the spread of the virus. Much of it will be used to help China.
Through his foundation, Bill Gates has helped to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. Well, today at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, he announced that his project called CEPI, or the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, has $460 million. He sat down with CBS News to talk about how that money will go to preparing for the next great epidemic.
The idea is to take a new way of building vaccines that could let us develop in less than a year a novel vaccine. They're called DNA RNA vaccines, and so we'll fund a few projects to build specific vaccines, but not only will we get that, we'll prove out that these platforms can work, we'll understand the regulatory issues, and it gives us a chance of being able to respond in time when the next epidemic hits. We're in the same situation we were in before, where it takes years to build a new vaccine. But the scientific idea of these new platforms could radically change that, so that a lot of the steps are sitting there ready. The factory piece, understanding the regulatory piece, and you just have to plug in some information, do some quick safety profiles, and then you can get into manufacturing quite rapidly. Well, we need vaccines for a lot of things, not just epidemics. We need a HIV vaccine, a tuberculosis vaccine, a malaria vaccine. All of those things are in the works, and over the next decade, I think most of those we'll get solutions for.